Did the New Orleans Saints significantly improve their defense during this past offseason? I wish I could sit here and give you my opinion that yes, they definitely did. I can't. But what I can do is give you my opinion. It was partially by design and partially by circumstance that it didn't happen, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. Stick around this video. I'll break down some film. I'll talk about a depth chart and tie it all together why it may not matter that the defense didn't significantly improve this offseason. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. So instead of trying to explain in words, that would be very tough to do, um, exactly what I'm talking about, I pulled some film back from the 2025 season from the defense to kind of illustrate, I think, one of the major important points. There's two things that this coaching staff has talked about from the day they showed up, which is complementary football and versatility, whether you're talking about scheme and or players and or play calling, combination of it all, and the way it's going to work on both sides of the ball to bring you to complementary football. It's a lot to think about, and it's a lot to keep in mind. It's one of the things that at times, especially during this draft process and this offseason, kind of forgetting about that aspect of it and getting too locked into, we need this, we need that. When the reality of the situation is we need the right players, and specifically I'm talking about Brandon Staley and the defense, to fit what he wants to do or to give him the ability to be creative and move some players around. So with that in mind, let's go get some examples of how he did that in 2025, excuse me. So I pulled 4 plays. They're all passing plays. So first thing, I got to come clean on this. I tried to find some running plays, but quite honestly, this style of defense has really become prevalent in the last, not even a decade, less time than that. 5, 6 seasons, maybe. For the Saints, we're only entering season number 2. I'm having to learn and relearn a lot of stuff I thought I knew about football that was true at a certain period of time when talking about playing defense. Not necessarily so, or not in the same way as now. I do better at figuring that stuff out with the pass rush and the coverage than the run fits. Still trying to teach myself exactly what's going on there. So I struggle when I'm looking at run fits to really figure out what's going on. So that's my agenda this summer. I'll try to learn that better. So that being said, the 4 plays I pulled, fourth quarter against the Giants when McKinstry had an interception, and need to point out that they were down. They were on fourth down, needing, I think it was 6, 4th and 6, 4th and 7. So that does kind of change the dynamics of the play a little bit because Dart couldn't throw it away or necessarily be able to scramble for the first down, but they had to pick up a first down. So just keep that in mind when we go through. The next one is a Stalbert sack against the Jets. And then the next 2 are both from the Tennessee game late in the fourth quarter when we picked up big sacks we needed to seal that game and get the win, come out of there with the win. So in all 4 of them, you see a lot of versatility. You see, in the case of the McKinstry interception, you see some young players really having to step up and show the versatility of scheme as well as the versatility of some of these individual players. You definitely see the Brandon Staley versatility scheme, the way he can use different players in pass rush, sometimes the exact same player, sometimes different players doing similar things. In all cases, trying to be versatile enough scheme-wise with versatile players at the same time. You create confusion that the offense has to deal with, and when they can't, you give your playmakers an opportunity to make big plays. Now, I think it's very important that we recognize that, but also very important that before we look at the depth chart, we really see the picture of how it's supposed to work. This is one of Kool-Aid McKinstry's interceptions on the season, came against the Giants. Pre-snap, we're showing single high safety. That's Jonas Sanker up top. Top left of your screen, the top of your screen, the defensive left, excuse me, is Riley and Taylor. And it looks like they're matching up man up there. But Down at the bottom of your screen, you have Kool-Aid and Howden kind of looking like that may be a man matchup, but it's not quite as clear as it is on the defensive left. So at the snap of the ball, clearly we're matching up at the top of the screen. Sanker is still sitting single high. We are blitzing Werner, so that four-man front's now an odd-man front with five rushers coming in. The running back is staying in for protection. So DeMario's kind of spying in the backfield, keeping an eye on both Dart and the running back. Down at the bottom of your screen, it looks like possibly a matchup with Sanker and McKinstry, but it's not as clear as it is on the defensive left. And as the play progresses, it's a four-man route. We have five defenders. Sanker is still operating at the deep end, or the top end as a deep safety, excuse me again. But we're matching up on the defensive left. McKinstry and Howden are both kind of sitting a little bit. And it's not to say there isn't a matchup coming, but this is, I think, the pattern match concept that they talk about so much. They're kind of anticipating the patterns. Where are they going to go? And what happens is both those matchups are crossing the field. Meanwhile, Dart is kind of moving to the offensive right, kind of sliding in the pocket. Davis realized, I'm going to have to pick up that tight end crossing. Sanker is coming from the deep area going, I have to pick up that other tight end that's crossing because we're still locked up in man from the two receivers that were at the top of the screen. McKinstry now doesn't really have a responsibility, and he's sliding a little deeper. He's almost at this position right here. You can almost see where suddenly he's becoming the deep safety over the top. He's realizing Sanker's about to have to go pick up a man. Same time, Howden is realizing DeMario is sliding over, ready to pick up a tight end. He's kind of becoming the spy, waiting to see what Dart does or if that running back pops out the backfield. Now, at this point, it's a straight scramble drill almost. We have everything covered up pretty good. McKinstry and Howden still don't have a matchup with a man, but you can see Howden is staring directly at Dart, mirroring him where he's going to go. McKinstry's kind of reading what's going on here, and this is where, whether you want to call it hybrid, versatility, whatever Staley is looking for kind of comes to fruition. Dart doesn't have a lot of pressure yet. He actually stopped and looks back towards the middle of the field. It's not a lot of options here. So Dart's going to extend it out. Here comes the pressure from Werner. Tries to get a ball up. There is an awful lot of space between the hash and the sideline. Receiver, who I believe is Jalen Hyatt, can move towards the sideline. And if Dart can give him a pretty good pass where only he put it in an area where only he can catch it, they may be able to get something out of it. Kinstry's playing the ball the whole way. He's playing it like a safety would or a cornerback would if they were playing deep thirds. That ball is kind of on time and on target. So if McKinstry isn't there, I can't guarantee you that it's an incompletion. That was his ball all the way. He floats back. He makes the pick. You're seeing an illustration of how Staley wants to combine a lot of different concepts that are going on in one individual play. Hiding what they want to hide in coverage, being able to adjust, communicate, whether it's verbal or nonverbal. Everybody was on the same page, realizing who had to leave a spot and match up and become a man defender, and who had to fill in for the area that was just vacated. Several players swapped roles in the middle of that play to make this turn into a big play where McKinstry gets the pick. Now here we're looking at a 3rd and 6 from the Jets game. You would think you would be in a more base type package. Could be a run pass type situation. They're around right about midfield. So they could actually run here and think if they get it close, say pick up 5. If they don't actually get the 6, go for it on 4th down. So it's not a pin your ears back long down and distance by any stretch of the imagination, right? We're going to go with a 3-man front, except we're going to put Brian Brzee on the nose at the 0 tech. Granderson and Young are your edge guys, but technically we have 3 linebackers on the field with Werner and Davis, but Staubert kind of being a little bit of a hybrid the way we used him last year. He's somewhere in between. So you could consider it maybe an edge as much as off the ball linebacker. Riley McKinstry, the corners, Reed and Sanker are the safeties. Right before the snap, we've got 8 men in the box. They're going to put a guy in motion that Reed goes with, so kind of pulls him out the box. But if you look at what we've got going on there, Granderson and Stallbird, who are lined up on the line of scrimmage right in front of where you see Reed right now, you figure they're not going to send both of them. One of them's going, one of them's going to drop, probably going to be Stallbird. And you look on the right-hand side, Taylor's up there, but he's probably going to match up with the tight end in front of him. Werner looks like he's coming. Davis is actually lined up in the C gap, like he would be a normal defensive lineman instead of a linebacker. It's really a weird look. And you would think at this point, I would think that can they defend the run from this? They send basically the 5-man pressure because Werner's popped out of there. He's going into coverage. So it's Davis, it's Stallbert, it's Granderson, it's Young, and it's Brzee. Brzee gets tied up in the double team, but the left side just crumples. And there's nothing that they can do over there. They're trying to block 3 with 2. And it's set up so fast. You had a young quarterback for the Jets, and this definitely helped. But that's just a situation where, and I don't think there was Breece Hall in there at running back. Maybe the veteran quarterback with Breece Hall, you don't even try that. But the point being is Staley can get very inventive with different combinations of players on the field and send them in, put them in situations where I think sometimes the offense doesn't quite realize what's going on. And there was a lot of speed and quickness. And that was the most important part of this, I think. I think that was part of kicking Brzee to the inside, even though he didn't offer any pressure. He couldn't power through that double team, tied up 2 guys. Left that left side kind of open with only 2 blockers and 3 rushers. And there's just nothing they can do. So again, the versatility, the creativity, but he's got to have the right players to be able to do it. And the thing is, when Staley's using this creativity to bring pressure looks, you can go look at 2 plays from the Titans game, both that resulted in sacks, where we are in a really odd looking front. Technically, that is 5 defenders. Both times are going to be up front, but we only have 3 defensive linemen, 1 interior, who is Jonah Williams, actually lined up on the nose or in the A gap in a lot of these plays. But in these 2, he's up there where you would normally have somebody like Godshaw. You have Davis walking up, basically playing heads up on the tackle from a stand-up position. Granderson just outside the tackle. So you have almost a straight-up 3-tech on the right side and a 3-0 on the left side. And then you have our 2 edge players coming wide. And you're in a nickel behind it because Taylor, McKinstry, Riley, Reed, and Sanker are your 5 defensive backs. Granderson kind of cheats in a little bit at the beginning, right before the snap. So he's almost heads up on that tackle. But you're playing a game on the right-hand side with Jonah Williams and Demario Davis. And Williams is basically doing the same thing that Brzee was doing in the Jets example, is occupying 2 guys. It's not really bringing pressure per se, but he is freeing up another rusher, which in this case is Davis, and they do a good job of picking that up, but they just can't hold that pressure look for very long. Young's able to get off his block, and Ward does the smart thing and just goes down. But you had Davis closing, and then you had Cam looping around downfield almost to get to the backside, and that's an important thing to notice. So very similar look on this next play, and it's not actually the next play. It's a later series in the 4th quarter, and this was a big one on 4th down. Basically sealed the game for the Saints. But you had that same look. You're basically doing the same exact thing. Now you do see Cam kind of disappear for a second. He had a responsibility to the left side. He had to check down first. But as that same pressure evolves, where Young is beating his man one-on-one, Granderson actually splits a double team. Davis is blocked up, but we're covered downfield. So, and it's fourth down. Cam Ward's trying to come out of there and scramble. At this point, it's a downfield throw. Cam is back trailing the play like he did in the earlier sack I just showed you, and is able to get in there and clean this thing up. Responsibilities change just a little to get to the same outcome. It's kind of a wild concept to wrap your head around what Staley is trying to do, but I think these three plays kind of all illustrate he needs good football players in his system, but he needs the right players. Can be able to understand the scheme, understand what the offense is trying to do, and keep making these adjustments to take plays away from the offense, especially when it comes to young quarterbacks, confuse them a little bit, and be able to make big plays off of them. Whether or not our defense is improving is going to come down to the ads that we did make. Do they understand these concepts? Because they're all good football players. But are they the right good football players? So trying to tie 25 into what we did in 26 offseason and how it's going to carry forward. The two things that this coaching staff reached since the day they showed up, complementary football and versatility. And versatility in scheme, versatility in player ability, versatility in calling plays, and being able to adjust on the fly, whether you're talking about in the game, in the play, pre-snap to post-snap, whatever. It's a lot of things that they expect. The good news, I think, in all of this, we kept our coaching staff together. And so everybody returning now had his coaching staff showed up late, basically, because Philadelphia won the Super Bowl. But now they've had the full offseason. And what we saw last year when we're talking about complementary football between the three areas, special teams were bad and they didn't complement anything on the offensive defensive side. They couldn't flip the field, whether you're talking about punts, struggled to cover punts or kicks, returns weren't all that great. So consistently when they were involved, it seemed whatever side the ball was walking on the field after our special teams play was over was already starting one foot in the hole. On top of that, and this is what the Saints focused on primarily this offseason when you're talking about offense versus defense, is explosive plays. Dead last in the league last year, 61, I believe, total, and that's a combination of 10-plus yard runs, 20-plus yard receptions. Not good. Not really the ability of the offense to flip it on their own. Both offense and defense did improve over the course of the season. Defense faster and more consistent than the offense. They managed to basically finish top 10 in the NFL. Offense, not so much, but they did look leaps and bounds better and more productive over the last 7 games or so than they were the previous 10. Special teams never turned the corner. So the offseason primary focus, they added explosive playmakers on offense. They recognized that we've got to go get the best left guard that we can, sign David Edwards. So improve the offense. Same time, they went sign the best punter available in free agency. That ought to give a shot in the arm to the special teams. In the draft, they did have a primary focus on day 3, getting Baron Brown, a returner, Styles, who played some core special teams at Ohio State and also did do some returns. So it was a thought. This is areas we need to focus on, but primarily the focus was on the offense. I think the defense, and this is where circumstance comes in, was throughout free agency and the draft, and then following the draft and free agency, I think they had some very specific targets in mind. I don't necessarily think we've got all our top choices, but I think we were looking for the right type of players for certain reasons. So that is why, and we're going to look at best of my ability a depth chart that I tried to put together. But this is why I'm thinking that 30,000 foot view was we need to get Special teams and offense significantly better. We need to improve the defense as much as we possibly can, but most of our, you know, most of the voids that we need to fill and spend a lot of firepower to do it, whether it be in free agency in the draft, special teams, but especially on the offensive side, both of them thoroughly addressed. So I think what I see from this defense is more along the lines of a situation where you were just, when the circumstance presented itself, you went grab a player that filled a void. You look at the players that we did add, I don't think it's insignificant. Working logically from the defensive line back towards the secondary. When you drafted Mill in the second round, you got a very good football player here and one that fits the need. Circumstances, you probably got a player that, while not elite, I haven't seen anywhere disputing that he is an NFL ready defensive line run stopper. So if that turns out to be not true, then everybody in the NFL associated with the draft got that one wrong, not just the Saints. But I feel confident you're getting at least that. And that was one of the biggest needs the Saints defense had, is to really start adding a player in that front seven, especially a young one. You guys have to stop them. In the case of Miller, everybody was a little dodgy on what he brought or would be able to bring at the NFL level in pass rush. And hey, look, if he can do what Brzee and Jonah Williams did on those plays, this brings the ability for one of your other stud playmakers to try to make something happen and get the big play themselves. On the edge, Rumph, Jennings, and Wilson, I think, are all key adds in the sense. I think Rumph and Jennings, guys in the depth chart on the rotation that understand what's going on, can make some plays for you, but more importantly, aren't going to blow assignments and kill you. I think both of those guys fit that. Wilson, too, probably to a certain degree, but I think they're looking at Wilson going, look, you got one shot this year to go ahead and tap into that some of that first round potential and see if we can use you as an elite playmaker like you originally drafted for. Ellis fills a key void. I can't bring myself to say he replaces Demario Davis, but there was a void left there and type of player that could fill it. Cornerbacks, Emerson and Hall, I think put Yadam in a precarious situation. Hall is an interesting case because he is in a big list of cornerbacks that after you got out of that top level guys that they all know are really, really good and going to play in the NFL, he falls into an even bigger category of they're really good football players and should at some point be ready to go in the NFL. And depending on how fast they learn, how fast they develop, scheme fits, and everything else, it could happen as early as their rookie year. And the signing of Emerson gives you veteran presence that started 2 years for the Browns and backup, but you never know. He could be pushing for a starting job before it's all said and done. And ditto to Styles, same exact philosophy. Yeah, day 3 pick, not a big part of Ohio State's defense, but not an insignificant part of it either because of his just insane off the charts athletic ability and the fact that he played while maybe not logging a ton of snaps in any one position on that Ohio State defense in the backfield, logging snaps at all of them. And maybe in a position that because I really think Blackman is going to be the star right now out of who we have available, that could be a future look for him at some point. The primary focus this offseason was to play catch up with special teams in the offense because the defense was more or less maybe even ahead of schedule might be the best way to say it, but certainly on a schedule that they were happy with. When you look at the again pull back from that to that 30,000 view of what's going on with the whole team, let's go ahead and spend our resources on those other two areas, but let's keep an eye out for a Miller. If Miller had been drafted prior to that, there's a chance, I don't know how large it is, that the remaining defensive tackles kind of in that area may not have been on the Saints' radar and they may have went somewhere else in the draft. I have a feeling a lot of that went on after pick number 8 for us. And I think that's where the circumstance comes in where things could have fell differently. And you may have seen more playmakers drafted on defensive side because the guys we were looking at to make the difference on the offensive side got drafted before we could pick them or move up to grab them, whatever the case may have been. So I'm open to that possibility. I think the overall takeaway on the defensive side from this is the voids are filled, and they're not filled with, as far as I can tell, terribly bad football players. I think you got some that haven't lived up to expectations on this list. You have some that are, especially, two of the rookies we're talking about are going to have to be developed an awful lot to see if they can work up into that Riley Sanker position where suddenly you need them on the field for some reason as a rookie, and they're able to respond and play well. Hopefully that's the case. Regardless, I think what we're looking forward in the future, and not to do a deep dive in the way contracts and all of that is working out on the money side of it, but I think it plays into it too, where next year we will have the ability to start, and I hate to say it, start replacing some of the guys on this depth chart with elite players, whether through free agency or being able to bring back some guys and keep them here for a while, all the way moving into the draft and flipping from this year where the focus may be adding. That's where we're going to get some explosive young playmakers to add to the defense. So, to be perfectly honest, coming out of this draft, I was I was disappointed that while not unhappy about taking Tyson, and I see all the points to it, and that could potentially be a big deal for the Saints in the future. At the same time, going, you had a couple defensive players, Downs, Bain, just going, you could have grabbed them and get an elite type guy and stick him in that defense. We'll have to wait and see how this plays out because, unfortunately, using this kind of method, well, two things we have to account for. The first one being they may not be done in free agency before it's all said and done. So one of those top players that's still floating around out there, let's just throw one out there. Say Cam Jordan and Joey Bosa, both edge players out there, bring one of them in. Well, that redefines everything going on the edge. Outside of that, what's going to happen is OTAs, minicamp. People are going to be given an opportunity, not just the ones on this primitive depth chart that I put together, a chance to move up. And it's all going to come to head in training camp, and we won't know the results, whether this is an improvement, we managed to keep it the same, or the defense declines. I don't think you're going to have a true picture of that at all until the first couple of weeks of the season, in which case, may be too late to fix it if you need to. Last thing I'm going to say on this before we go, uh, if you bothered to count at any point, that is 27 names on here. I doubt seriously if we'll be carrying 27 players from defense on the 53-man roster. But what ultimately I came to, I think these are the right now, heading into OTAs and minicamp, your best shot, the top 27 to find a spot on the 53-man roster. Some are locks, some aren't. And the ones behind them that aren't on this list have got some work to do, but I be honest with you, I think if they turn some heads, they can work their way in a conversation just like that. So that's what we have for you today. Please hit like, share, subscribe for me if you don't mind. And until I see you next time, I'm Tim. Peace out and who dat.